Hey everyone, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I'm your host G1. As always, I hope you are having a good week. It has been a busy one for me. Before I get going, I want to fill you in on some show details. I think I am going to have to push the posting time of the show to Friday for the foreseeable future. It just looks like Thursdays are going to be tough for me to get things done, as I'm having to commit more of my time to real work, much later in the day than I did before. I'm not able to really kind of knock off until 5:30, 6 o'clock, something like that, on Thursdays, which has not been how it has been before. But anyway, I just had a little bit of a schedule change, and it's making things difficult for me. And that means unless I write the show on Wednesdays and then record it on Thursday evening, I can't really get it done in time. I tried last night, Thursday night, to put the show together, and I just got home so late, and we got kind of done with dinner and all that, and it was like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I said, it's too late. I'm going to push it until tomorrow. And that's starting to look like it's going to be a pattern. So I'm sorry about that, but I think it's better to be upfront about it and go ahead and push that time so that I don't look like I'm slacking and just leaving you guys hanging. I may still be able to get a show out on Thursdays on occasion, if I'm able to wrap things up earlier at work, or if it's great news week, and there's some burning topic that I just want to talk about, and I get it done, written on Wednesday night and recorded and that kind of stuff. But outside of that, it looks like it's just going to be regular Fridays going forward. So what are we talking about this week? Well, a couple of things from the mothership that Concerned American has posted over there on westernrifleshooters.us. Two items that I think are very, very important and very, very much a window into some of the more secret things going on in the background and whatnot to what we're dealing with today. The first off, the interview that Tucker Carlson did with the cybersecurity expert, in which I believe posted from Tucker last week, maybe over the weekend. I can't remember the exact time, but go find that and watch it. It was posted on Gab a few places. It was posted on Western Rifle Shooters. I saw it on other things. If you follow Tucker on Twitter or X or YouTube, it's over there. Go find that and watch it. It is likely one of the most important interviews we've had in a very long time. I think it actually overshadows the Putin interview by a lot. And it is just pretty extraordinary. It details the links and efforts to which the deep state engaged in suppression of speech and narrative control that took place after the 2016 election and ever since. There's a quibble that I have a little bit with the expert, and that is that he pretty much lays the blame for this effort squarely into the hands of the military-industrial complex and an evolution of the MIC. He does kind of hint of this being some part of the intelligence-industrial complex, but to me, I just don't think that he rolled them into it enough. It really is a joint, cohesive effort that has taken place here. I believe that the deep state, of course, is a mixture of those outlets and not firmly centered in either of them, but I don't think he lays enough at the feet of the intelligence community. Regardless, it is an amazing interview, and you should watch it. The second piece or article is from a blog that details the program ran by the intelligence agencies throughout the late 1960s and well into the 80s and 90s. It's called Operation Condor. And this was the program by which the intel agencies countered communism. They fought communism and its efforts to take root in Central and South America. At least that's what it began as. This is a good article, and it's really kind of a series of articles, and it really dives into the program with a lot of focus on the centralized command and control network that was put into place to communicate and really drive this operation across national borders and essentially become an extra-national entity or breakaway civilization. It's very good stuff, and you'll have to put up with a lot of language that kind of disparages the so-called far or extreme right elements in those countries because, those were the primary people involved in this operation, but it is the truth that is who was primarily behind it, so we can't really gloss over that. It does, however, warrant a detour here for a few minutes to those points. This article presents this operation in a very negative light, and it is true that there are current implications of this operation that we're dealing with. Many people were killed by these people in South and Central America in the name of stamping out communism. Some of those people, however, had nothing really at all to do with communism. They were just very simply running in disagreement with the governments in place in those countries. And I am very much in favor of rooting out seditious elements and crushing communism and its descendants, and I advocate for the need to be ruthless in that effort. But there's a danger to that. It's because of that danger that I've also warned that our enemies are driving us to tactics and methods that become, in many ways, just as dangerous as the things we are fighting. It is a pervasive kind of power that corrupts everyone involved in it. And you might start off with the grandest or purest of intentions, but when you go to the lengths that honestly we have to go, you have to be able to pull yourself back from that. And unfortunately, when governments gain this kind of power, there's really no stopping it unless there's some kind of massive upheaval in that government. It's very easy for these elements to root themselves into bureaucracies and power structures and just continue to grow and evolve and become a power of their own. And in fact, I think that is what we are seeing today. These programs that began in the intelligence community back in really as early as the 1950s have now been turned against our own population. They've evolved from what might have been a noble cause at the very beginning to becoming an uncontained monster. Operation Condor grew out of Operation Gladio, which was ran in Europe, but it was essentially the same thing. And it didn't take very long to corrupt the organizations that began them because those organizations were born in corruption. The intelligence community was only ever interested in power, and it never really cared who that power was directed at. We now have now come to an age where this corruption of these agencies has grown so complete that they feel no compelling reason why they should not use the very same operational tactics and methodologies on our own people. They feel strong enough and emboldened enough that they no longer have to continue the charade that, this is only meant for foreign nations or foreign peoples or foreign groups and agencies. No, they have no problem about calling us the enemy and turning these tools against us. Now, moving back to the military and the interview with Tucker Carlson, what you see here is just another offshoot of that same MO. The military-industrial complex had its hand in developing that command and control network for the intelligence community. And in fact, the military has its own intelligence arm, so it's not surprising that there's overlap there. The 20-year war on terror saw a very quick development and maturation of these same types of programs, but centered in the Department of Defense that directed information warfare at countries where we were told there were hotbeds of Islamic terrorism. Now, those international boogeymen can only exist for so long before people begin to ask, who are we really fighting and why can we not seem to defeat them? Where is all this money going? So there has to be a change of venue on occasion for these operations to continue under new names and with new bad guys. there's no end to it. It is an everlasting war on humanity, it seems. Now, to detour again for a second, yes, before you think I have washed over something, there are agendas behind all of this driving it. And I will get into those things in a program that's coming up in a few weeks. I have an entire script already done that I want to polish up a little bit before I record it. It's something that I've had in mind for some time, pulling a lot of elements together, and I just didn't quite know how to present it. But I think I have it figured out, and I think it explains a lot of what we see today and a lot of the confusion and why things just don't seem to add up. We think we can see this overarching, I'll call it conspiracy for lack of a better term, the elites, whomever, or a certain group of people behind all of these things. But in reality, there's something more going on there, and it's far more complex than that. So we'll get into that in another show. So back to these two powerful entities in the ick and the mick, if you will. They both need bad guys. They are not above, however, creating those bad guys themselves to justify their activity. In fact, I think what happens is when they can't find a bad guy overseas somewhere, they just create one in an unsuspecting country just to buy time for something else to develop. But at any rate, the incorrectly named false flag operations are also well known to people at this point. And keep that in mind here as I go into something that I'm not sure that anyone has put together yet. So I think this is new ground somewhat. 2016 saw these entities both mobilize against the sitting, lawfully elected president. And I'm not suggesting that Donald Trump is a false flag or is somehow controlled opposition, even though some people think he is. I believe that he represents a different faction, a faction that's behind the scenes and is in opposition to these two entities. And that is why they went so hard against him. And that is not to say that his faction is somehow a champion of everyday people. I can't say that with any kind of certainty. Just that his faction is opposed to the one or ones, could be two or multiples, that really run the MIC and the IC. That's the Intelligence Industrial Complex, if you haven't figured that acronym out yet. This should be terrifying on its face, and people should be probably storming Langley at this point, but we're dealing with that full spectrum information war that the military side is putting out there. So let's look at 2016 just as a marker for when these operations turned their full weight and focus homeward, even though there are footprints of this happening for a long time before that, going well back for decades. But we just need a marker here, so let's use 2016. Now let's turn to Ukraine. This week marked the anniversary of the coup in Ukraine that led to the current President Zelensky being elected. There was a period of time before his election, but this was the downfall of Poroshenko, I believe his name was, the pro-Russian leader of Ukraine. 10 years ago, our intelligence complex overthrew him and replaced him with a pro-Western leadership, and this culminated, of course, in the invasion by Russia. Now, this is well known in Ukraine at this point. It's popular knowledge. It's not quite popular knowledge here. There's still, and I still see just poor people who buy into the information war posting this week about this anniversary. But at any rate, it's pretty well known in Ukraine. It's pretty popular knowledge, and many people have no issue with it, but many do. Many people there understand that this led to the war that is currently devastating their country, and they placed blame on Putin, but also on the West for escalating this situation. There are currently elements of the Ukrainian military who are popularly labeled as far right, and sometimes even called Nazis. And one of the motivation that the Russians are using to justify their military operation is what they're calling denazification of the Ukrainian government. They say these elements, these fascist elements, are too prevalent in Ukrainian government and bureaucracy, and we have to get in there to overturn them and uproot them and pull them out of the government, because otherwise Ukraine will continue to be anti-Russian. And so that's one of the motivations for the special military operation. Now, it should be very clear to anyone with eyes and ears that this week is a turning point in that conflict in Ukraine. The money being provided by the West is drying up, and enthusiasm for continued support has really concentrated itself almost exclusively in just the most hardcore true believers. I think the deep state has already cut and run, and if they've not pulled out completely, they are in the last phases of moving as much of their operations out as possible. And in fact, that might have been one of the motivations that caused them to be in such opposition to Trump at the beginning, that he was not going to give them the time to move the game out of Ukraine. But anyway, moving on. That game, in my opinion, is likely over, and we are in the cleaning up portion and the tying up of loose ends phase. So Zelensky might want to be very careful about car rides that he takes through squares. So when all of this falls apart, what do you think happens to those hardcore right-wingers in Ukraine? Where do you think they're going to go? The most well-known ones can't stay in Europe. Okay, we saw this week the Russian who crossed over and flew his helicopter to the Ukrainian side. Well, he was hunted down and killed in Spain. Even though he was living under an assumed identity, someone gave that up to Russian special forces or Russian FSB, and he was executed. Europe is going to be too hot for these guys. They're not going to be able to stay there. So it's no doubt in my mind that they're going to come here to the United States. Either they will be brought here by our MIC or IC, or they will use the wide open border and just walk over in secret. Either way, they will be here with a new identity. Now, they're trained and they're battle hardened, and they have a hard right political outlook, as we're being told. Remember that information war thing. We've already seen weapons from Ukraine turn up in the hands of Mexican drug cartels. Just this week, in fact, we saw an ambush of Mexican police by a cartel group using rockets and mines, most likely purchased from weapons dealers originating out of Ukraine. I think you can begin to put the pieces together here and get the thought that kind of struck me this week. How long after this collapse in Ukraine do we see the story coming out of the information warfare channels following this following scenario? Hard-right Ukrainians have come into the country with weapons that they had in Ukraine and have aligned themselves with right-wing Republican elements to take revenge on the U.S. government and its people for betraying them in the war. They have the support of Putin and the Russian intelligence agencies, and that means every right-winger needs to be monitored and disarmed for our sacred democracy. Now, I think some variation on that is already being put out. The foundations are already being laid for that. And I think it's especially applicable if a Trump victory happens in the election, which I don't think is out of the question. I think there's some cards that can fall and things that can be put into place or show themselves that lead to an actual Trump victory in the election. And I think we talked a little bit about that last week. Do you think that he's the guy that can fix this? Do you think he has the will and the ability to crush these operations in our government that have turned against us? Because that's what we're facing. This scenario will be floated out there to justify all kinds of further encroachments and crushing of our liberty. Do you think he's the guy to deal with that? I'll leave you to answer that for yourself, because that is all the time I have for this week. like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.